we're going to start in the United States, where 3.8 million Americans have signed on for jobless benefits last week. This now brings the total number of out of work to more than 30 million. And as you can see, this graph shows the number of unemployment claims over the last 6 weeks. It shows just how the country's virus lockdown has hit jobs there. And there may still be more to come, as Michelle Fleury explains.
We saw 3.8 million Americans filing for unemployment benefits, and as you point out, this is a reduction from what we saw the prior week, which was above 4 million, and certainly down from the 6.9 record figure that we saw 1 week in March. However, now making claims who is without a job, and it gives you a sense of the sort of depths of this kind of labour market contraction we're seeing as a result of the pandemic.
And when it comes to consumer confidence, when is the situation, if it's impossible to sort of bring to mind how the people are coping, those who have lost their jobs, who are claiming unemployment benefits, when will we see a situation where people will be willing to spend, when we're going to see consumer confidence?
Yeah, I mean, a short time ago I was at a food pantry and there was a line about 2 blocks long. You know, it's hard to imagine when you're in that situation, queuing up to get food, at what point do you start to feel confident again? There is no end in sight, at least here in New York City, as to when the lockdown will end. Therefore, it's hard to imagine when the jobs market will pick up. And so that makes it very hard to see how you do get confidence. And when that does happen, you talk to many people, they tell you the same thing. On the one hand, they need to get back to work because they need the jobs, they need the income. On the other hand, they're nervous. They don't expect things to get back to how it was before. Or I was talking to a restaurant owner who was saying, you know, with half a sort of restaurant full, they can't make the kind of money they need. That's why you don't expect consumer confidence to recover soon. That's why consumer spending remains so muted with everything shut.
Michelle Fleury there in New York. Well, yesterday we heard the US economy had suffered its most severe contraction for more than a decade after GDP shrank at an annual rate of 4.8% in the first 3 months of the year. Today, the European Union, the world's largest economic bloc, says its economy shrank at the sharpest pace on record in the first quarter. And this graph shows the GDP of all countries who were using the euro between January and March. There was a contraction of 3.8%, even worse than during the financial crisis of 2008. France registered its worst economic slowdown since the Second World War. And the head of the European Central Bank says that how much worse the damage gets depends on how long countries maintain their virus lockdowns.
Given the high uncertainty surrounding the ultimate extent of the economic fallout, growth scenarios produced by ECB staff suggest that euro area GDP could fall by between 5 and 12% this year, depending crucially on the duration of the containment measures and the success of policies to mitigate the economic consequences for businesses and workers.
Christine Lagarde with the situation with the Eurozone. Well, Aaron Heselhurst has more on the impact that coronavirus has had on European economies.
Today we saw the real evidence of what a lockdown does for some of these Eurozone economies. As you said, the Eurozone economy shrank for 3.8%. Traffic together just to show you how dramatic this is. Take a look at that, because you can see that even during the financial crisis, we didn't have it this bad at all. And again, Christine Lagarde also mentioned that the bad numbers, they are just starting to come. As you mentioned, the first 3 months of this year, so these numbers for January, February, March, we know we didn't go into...
Claims were about to rise above 20 million. Think about it, they're now 30 million. And onto this image now. This is a mountain of potatoes. This is in Idaho, and this image was taken a week ago. Idaho is a major potato producing state, and the places that would normally be buying these potatoes, things like restaurants and stadiums, for example, are of course closed. So, well, farmers are having to abandon their crops because they have no one to sell to. And the US is the largest economy in the world. It has huge resources to stop people going hungry. Stephanie Hegarty has been looking at places where that isn't the case.
Food is not something that these people used to worry about.
no nos van a pagar.
I see that the suffering here is too much. It's getting out of balance.
This pandemic doesn't treat everyone equally. When you're living on a daily wage, being out of work means no money for food.
This is not animals. This is hungry people.
Their world is being ripped from under them. The International Labour Organization says that 1.6 billion people could be out of work as a result of this pandemic. That's half the world's workers.
Mire, todo lo que ama me ha dado.
Rosa and her daughter were let go from their jobs as domestic cleaners with no pay. Now they rely on a food bank.
¿Qué nos hace falta? ¿Qué hace falta? Que ayuden a los que estamos abajo. Porque también sabemos trabajar, también sabemos ganarnos la vida. Pero ahorita, ¿dónde y cómo?
El cuarto. ¿Cómo está, señora Rosa? Buenos días. ¿Cómo le va?
Governments all over the world have plans to help people on the breadline, but it's not getting to some fast enough. And there aren't always food banks to fill the gap.
বর্তমানে মাছ মাংসের কথা বলি না আর বর্তমানে এখন যে অবস্থা আছে আগামী দিনগুলো যদি এই অবস্থা থাকে তাহলে আমরা অনেক না খাওয়া মরা লাগবো আমরা অনেক দ্রুত আছি
We wanted to speak to Anju again, but she left the city to her parents' village, where at least she can grow something to eat.
As you can see, there is nothing left in the kitchen at all. There's nothing to eat at home at all. No food stores at home. Everywhere is just empty. Everywhere is empty. By the pot is empty. There's no money, no food, nothing for him and his family and his daughter. So I gave him little assistance I can be able to do.
Femi can rely on friends for now, but they are also on the edge. They've had nothing from the government so far. Lockdown restrictions have cut Prasanna off from her local market, and stocking up is not an option. As lockdowns go into their second month, the next problem is keeping a roof over their head.
Pues apenas el domingo nos tocó dar la renta. Y ahorita ya hay que empezar a juntarla del próximo mes. Y sin trabajo, pues ¿cómo le podemos hacer? No hay cómo. Mayo, si te dicen se solicita, pero hasta mayo, junio. Y pues los gastos no te esperan.
Stephanie Hegarty, BBC News.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast. You're with Charlie State and Naga Monchetti.
Our headlines today. The Prime Minister says Britain is past the peak of the outbreak and is promising to set out a plan for gradually lifting the lockdown.
He suggests that face masks could play a part when restrictions are eased.
Face coverings will be useful, both for epidemiological reasons, but also for giving people confidence that they can go back to work.
And the government says it's confident it's met its target of 100,000 coronavirus tests a day by the end of April.
The future for Heathrow, with airlines struggling and quarantine measures for arrivals considered. I'll speak to the boss of our busiest airport to see what he wants in place to handle it all.
Good morning. The majority of footballers are scared of returning to action ahead of two crucial meetings today. Manchester City's Sergio Aguero says players will be worried about returning due to concerns over the health of their families.
Good morning, it's Friday the 1st of May. Our top story this morning. Boris Johnson says the UK is past the peak of coronavirus and can see light at the end of the tunnel.
Promising to reveal detailed plans next week on how the government will lift lockdown and restrictions. The Prime Minister said that Facebook is going to talk to the Housing Minister, Robert Jenrick. That's in around half an hour. And we'll hear from business leaders, including the Chief Executive of Heathrow Airport.
On a ventilator.
Of this disease.